Have you ever worried about what SHTF scenarios are most likely to happen? We often have. I'm Andrew, and I'm going to be sharing with you what we feel are the 5 most likely scenarios that could happen right now as of 2022, and some ways you can prepare for them. Before we share with you though, do us a favor and tell us in the comments below what you feel is the most likely scenario, and let's see if it lands on our list. 5. War with China. A Cold War or a proxy war. China is a growing power that in many areas of the world has direct competing interests with the United States. As time progresses, a large-scale clash between the established power of the United States and the growing power of China seems to be growing inevitable. We can see examples of this already happening in the Straits of Taiwan and the South China Sea, where U.S. and allied planes and warships have already had close run-ins with their Chinese counterparts. We can also see examples of this taking place throughout parts of East Africa, where the U.S. and China have placed competing military bases within mere miles of each other along busy shipping routes. While I don't feel the chance of this turning into a direct conflict are high, the chances of a Cold War or proxy war occurring, I would say, are. This would have major impacts on the average citizen, with the majority of goods being purchased by people being produced and sourced from places in China and Taiwan. If this occurs, it will have a significant impact on your daily lives, and it will cause many shortages for items ranging from power tools to computers to cars, and it would far surpass shortages we have already seen so far. The best way to prepare for this scenario is to decrease reliance on foreign goods. Any items you need that are produced in East Asia, we would recommend you get sooner than later, as they will become unavailable rapidly if this does happen. Another thing to consider as well would be to include in your preps would be stockpiling cash and precious metals and food. As with how much the economies are tied together between the US and China, a swift separation caused by conflict inevitably would lead to economic downturns and even the possibility of rapid inflation. Natural disaster. A natural disaster is the most likely, but also the most expected SHTF situation, and at some point in your life, you will probably deal with one. These types of disasters can vary in severity, and based on your location, you could face things ranging from hurricanes and wildfires to floods and blizzards. You want to do your research and determine what's most likely to impact you based off your locations. While you could see a relatively rapid recovery from these disasters, you also could see lingering effects that last weeks, if not into months, such as major damage to local infrastructure, such as bridges, roads, rail, power, gas, and water supplies. While exactly how you prepare for a natural disaster can vary, there are a couple things that would be in common between all these different types. The first one would be deciding on a safe location you can go in the disaster, and make sure you have at least 2 weeks worth of food and water as a great start. Adding into this would be a good radio for communications with the outside world and to listen in for news and weather reports, as well as the addition of a generator and an off-grid camping kitchen and the fuel for that kitchen, as it's going to help you significantly in making it easier to deal with the aftermath of that type of disaster. Number 3 would be global food shortages. As of the time of this video, the war in Ukraine is still raging with no current signs of peace on the horizon. Russia and Ukraine together produce nearly 30% of the world's wheat, 20% of the world's corn, and 60% of the world's sunflower oil, and shortages of these products are already starting to cause problems in many nations. At the time, these shortages are primarily impacting Middle Eastern and African nations, but could be further reaching than that here soon. We're also seeing hoarding of grains and refusal to export food by nations such as India and China. Compounding this even more above those issues already would be initiatives towards green farming, which we have seen limits placed on farm productions and ranch productions in certain countries due to emission standards. Shortages and drastic cost increases in fertilizer have also added into this dangerous combination even more, causing many farmers to shy away from utilizing fertilizer, which can actually account for up to 50% of the farmer's total crop production. Even if there is a peaceful end to the conflict overseas today, it's possible that we would still see the rippling effects on the global food supplies for years to come. This is something that you should heavily consider preparing for and should be high on your list of situations that could develop into something more. There are several ways you can prepare for this scenario and help mitigate the effects it's going to have on you. Stockpiling food such as dried rice, beans, and canned meats while they are still readily available can help you bridge gaps when there is no availability. This will also help you survive through periods of potential hyperinflation in food prices that would more than likely set in during this time if we see this crisis worsen. If you have enough room, you also could even take it one step further and start a garden or plant fruit-producing trees and even start to raise chickens. Going this far would provide you with a great amount of self-sufficiency and could potentially prevent you from having any direct impacts from these disruptions going on within your daily lives. Mass civil unrest, number 2. Throughout this previous several years, we have seen a dramatic uptick in violence and civil unrest throughout the country, fueled by different social movements, political upheaval, and division. As of this point, there seems to be no real signs of this slowing down, with political leaders seemingly encouraging this behavior on both sides of the aisle. It's completely possible this unrest could spiral into something much worse and more widespread with lingering effects. While I don't personally foresee this breaking out into a full-out civil war like some people seem to predict, I could see these events leading to large swaths of urban areas specifically becoming lawless and crime controlled beyond what we are already seeing. The best option to prepare for this would be involving you getting away from large urban centers and into smaller suburban or rural areas where the impacts are going to be less felt. As well, another option to help prepare for this would be getting a certain degree of self-sufficiency and seeking out training on how to defend yourself and your family as well if this progresses. Number 1 that's going to make our list is a grid down / infrastructure type collapse. The United States is operating on an overused and undermaintained power grid and infrastructure system. We've already seen failures in these systems during the past summer where grids are under such strain we saw threats of rolling blackouts by power providers. We've seen how even a single snowstorm crippled large portions of the power grid and caused rolling blackouts as well. We've even seen how failures in the water system have managed to cripple a state's capital cities for months, providing their citizens with no clean drinking water. More than likely, we will continue to see these type of breakdowns occur, and they will start to be more frequent and on larger scales. This doesn't even take into the account the lack of security around critical infrastructure systems, such as power stations and pipelines. We've seen instances where hackers are able to take control of pipelines and hold them for ransom. The chances of attacks on these infrastructure systems seem to grow year by year, and a large-scale attack could cause major damage that would severely cripple portions of the United States for weeks, if not months, or even years. Preparing for a complete grid collapse of any sort may sound like it's a daunting task, but it's something I could promise you is feasible to accomplish. Prepping for this would involve putting a large amount of effort and scale towards your self-resilience. While this can start off with small stockpiles of additional food and water, your end goal would be able to provide a full amount of self-production for food and the ability to filter water and generate your own power. What do you think? What scenarios do you think we've missed? Or do you want to see us cover or talk about more in detail? Let us know, and if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button on the way out. Most of all though, stay safe and stay prepared.